This story is about a guy named Daniel. Daniel had gone solo hiking in the mountains of Colorado. He was a pretty experienced hiker and had already completed many trails before. That morning, around 9 a.m., he started his hike. The weather was perfect, the sky was clear, and there were a few other hikers on the trail. But about 2 hours later, things started to change. The trail slowly began to get narrower, and after a while, Daniel realized that he had wandered off the main trail. He took out his map, but his phone had no signal. Daniel thought it wasn't a big deal. He figured he would just follow the trail and eventually find his way back. But then he noticed something strange. The forest had suddenly gone completely quiet. No birds, no wind, just total silence. Then he heard something behind him. Footsteps. It sounded like someone was walking right behind him. Daniel stopped. The footsteps stopped too. He slowly turned around and looked behind him, but the trail was completely empty. No one was there. He started walking again. A few seconds later, he heard the footsteps again. This time, they sounded faster. Daniel's heart started beating harder. He began to walk faster. And that's when he saw someone ahead on the trail. A man was standing in the middle of the path, completely motionless. Daniel assumed it was probably another hiker, but as he got a little closer, he realized something strange. The man wasn't even looking at him. He was just standing there, facing directly toward the dense forest. Daniel called out to him, "Hey!" There was no response. Then Daniel watched as the man slowly walked into the trees and disappeared into the forest. A few moments later, Daniel realized something unsettling. The trail ahead was actually a dead end. If he had followed that man into the woods, he probably would have become completely lost in the mountains. This incident happened to Lisa and her boyfriend, Mark. The two of them had gone mountain camping for the weekend. They found a quiet, isolated spot deep in mountains and set up their tent there. By around 11 p.m., both of them were already asleep inside the tent. Then suddenly, Lisa woke up. At first, she wasn't sure why, but then she heard something outside. Slow footsteps. It sounded like someone was walking in circles around their tent. Lisa quietly nudged Mark and woke him up. The two of them stayed completely still, listening. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then the footsteps came again. This time they were clearer. Someone was definitely walking around their tent. Then they heard something else, the sound of the tent zipper moving, very slowly, like someone outside was trying to open the tent. Mark immediately grabbed his flashlight and shouted, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped instantly. For a few seconds, everything went completely silent. Then, suddenly, a deep voice came from outside the tent. "Help me." Lisa felt her stomach drop. There was something very strange about the voice. It didn't sound natural. It almost sounded like someone trying to imitate a human voice. Mark didn't open the tent. Instead, he pointed the flashlight toward the tent fabric, and that's when they saw it. A shadow on the outside of the tent. A shadow of a person. But something about it looked wrong. The shape of the head looked slightly distorted, like it wasn't quite human. Neither of them moved. They just sat there in silence, watching the shadow. Then, after a few seconds, the shadow slowly walked away from the tent and disappeared back into the forest. Neither of them slept for the rest of the night. The next morning, they checked the ground around the tent, but what they saw made the whole situation even stranger. There were no footprints at all around their campsite, as if no one had ever been there. This story happened to three friends. They were hiking in the mountains when they came across another hiker on the trail. The man started walking with them. He said he was following the same trail. At first, it didn't seem strange. Hikers often cross paths and walk together for a while. But after a few minutes, the three friends noticed something odd. The man barely spoke. Whenever they tried to start a conversation, he would only give very short answers. Still, he kept walking with them. For nearly 30 minutes, the four of them continued down the trail together. Eventually, they reached a point where the trail split into two directions. One of the friends stopped and pulled out a map to check which path they were supposed to take. The others stood there waiting. It only took a few seconds, but when they looked up again, the man was gone. Completely gone. There were no footsteps, no sound of branches moving, just an empty trail. The three of them looked around, confused. They assumed the man must have quietly taken the other path while they were looking at the map, so they didn't think much more about it. They continued their hike and eventually made their way back to the parking area later that day. Near the trailhead, they spoke with a park ranger. During the conversation, one of them casually mentioned the strange hiker they had walked with earlier. The ranger asked them a simple question. What was the man wearing? They described him: the jacket, the backpack, the hat. The ranger went completely silent for a few seconds. Then he said something that made all three of them feel uneasy. That description matches a hiker who went missing on this trail 3 years ago. No one ever found him. The mountains can be beautiful places, but sometimes when you're deep in nature, you experience things that are very hard to explain. And when you're miles away from civilization, every strange moment feels even more disturbing. If you enjoy hearing true horror stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Midnight Masquerade, because every week we explore disturbing stories that stay with you long after the video ends. And maybe the next time you go hiking in the mountains, you might want to pay a little more attention to the people around you, because sometimes when you're out on a lonely trail, you might not actually be alone.